Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this particular portion of our day-long broadcast on this first anniversary. This is a particularly important broadcast to some of us because it was last year, after 9/11, when we invited a number of kids and some adults to come in and talk to us about an event which was so extraordinarily raw for all of us. And we were immensely struck. I think everybody in the country who saw it was immensely struck by the wisdom that was exhibited by some of the kids who were with us on that particular day. We've invited some of them back to help us get through another day. First, here's some of what they said last year.
I can't believe this has happened. It's very scary.
Every time I see airplanes, I get really nervous.
It's hard talking to your parents.
Like, what's gonna happen next, you know?
Is my mom gonna come, or is she okay? And I didn't know.
I don't really get, like, what did we do? Like, we didn't do anything. Why'd they do it? Why'd they do it?
What has the United States done to install such hatred into these people's hearts?
We created them because we made the guns. We sold the guns.
People here shouldn't label other people just because of what their nationalities are. This was an organization, not a nation.
I know that he's special, but I want him to be special here because he's always gone, and he's going to be gone even more since that they did this.
I know that it was a big wake-up call for our country, and they're trying to make us be terrified of them.
Well, some of those kids and some of those adults, as I said, are back with us today. And so let's just begin. Justin, you were here with us last year. How do you think we're doing?
I think we're doing better as individuals because we're much more prepared if something else would happen.
Kamayed, nice to see you again. Hey? You don't look any different from last year, either. How are you feeling these days?
Well, I feel much better than I did right after it happened. I talked to my parents a lot, and they made me feel much better. And I'm still a bit scared, but I know that, well, I know that you can't, if we just hit our heads and we're really afraid and just didn't face the danger, then, you know, what's the point of life then? We wouldn't be having any fun. And that wouldn't be good. And then the terrorists who did this to us would be succeeding and would be doing what they wanted to do to us, and we don't want that to happen.
Thank you. Andrew?
I think it's shown everybody that there are really evil people in the world who won't stop, and I think it's shown a lot of younger people what the price of freedom is.
Is anybody still concerned, still feeling vulnerable? Michael?
Yeah. I'm still, like, afraid of flying planes. After 9/11, I haven't rode on a plane since. I just won't go.
I'd like to talk for a moment and see what the level of your interest is about this question of safety in the country, which brings us to Lisa Stark, who covers more about safety, I think, than anybody else. You worry about airports, you worry about transportation. How safe is it these days to fly in America?
I do think it's safer than it was a year ago on September 11th. I think it's safer for some of the reasons we've talked about. The planes are more fortified, you have stronger cockpit doors, you have people more aware that aren't going to let a terrorist take over a plane. Is it 100% safe? I don't think anyone could say that. I don't think anything's 100% safe, and I think they have some things they still need to do to make it safer, and they're working on those things.
Wasn't that on, like, 9/11 that we were, like, sleeping? We weren't, like, really aware of what was going on. We weren't, like, ready for what could happen.
You know, when you look back at things, sometimes things seem really clear, and I think when you look back, there were signs that say people could use planes in this way. But I don't think anyone had put the puzzle together. And there's a lot of question about whether they should have or not.
Gracie?
What were you thinking, like, the first time you went on a plane after September 11th?
I was nervous about it. I was watching everyone on the plane very carefully. And, you know, I was thinking about what could be used as a weapon on the plane if I had to do something. And I was watching all my travelers to say, who could I call for help? And I was watching who was going up near the cockpit. And I think other people on the plane were too. And I still do that when I get on planes. And I think if you're on an airplane and something's happening, everyone on that plane, your mom, your dad, every other passenger is going to get up and tackle the guy or the girl who's doing something. So I think everyone's going to stop them from taking over the plane. That wasn't the attitude a year ago, because we didn't think something like this could happen. And people just sat in their seats, except for Flight 93.
Flight 93, which crashed in Pennsylvania, they did have a cockpit voice recorder, and indeed members of the family have heard it, and I think they're the only ones to have heard it other than the investigators. You don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but Joanna's brother was on Flight 93. And did you hear the tape?
My sister-in-law and my mother heard them, and they both told me at one point of the tape they turned to each other and they heard my brother's voice, so they said it was very moving.
Make a difference to you to make that connection?
I knew that he was a hero before they told me what they had heard on the tape, so what they had told me didn't really change my opinion.
What have you been doing for the last year?
I have started the Caring Crew, which is...
Caring Crew?
Caring Crew. It's just getting started now. We are forming all these teenagers together who are going to help the families babysitting or mowing the lawn and anything that they need us to do, and we're going to help the victims, the families, and the children.
Sort of like the Peace Corps and the Freedom Corps
yes.
as well. You know, you remind me that one of the people here from last year is Calvin Butts from the Abyssinian Baptist Church. Do you find a huge difference in the last year of people wanting to do things for other people as a result of all this?
I think there's been a profound difference in people's spirituality. For instance, it's connected to what you just mentioned about volunteering and helping. More people, in terms of their own spirits, have been moved to help, not only with regard to direct action regarding September 11th, but just in all areas, responding to poverty, counseling with young people, tutoring after school, because more people feel a sense of urgency about what we need to give. Moreover, it has made us all much more profoundly aware of the existence of evil in our world. I think people had tended to forget about evil, or at least characterize it as the exorcist, you know, possessing a little girl in the bedroom. But it's certainly much more profound than that. And young people particularly have to deal with the age-old, millennia-old question of why do bad things happen to good people.
Well, that's a tough one. Michael, you've had your hand up there looking like a flagpole.
I have a question for Joanne.
Okay.
When you found out that your brother was on the plane, what were you thinking?
I was at school, and my mother came to pick me up, and she told me right away that my brother was on a hijacked plane. And I was more shell-shocked, I think, than anything else. I just kind of said, okay, let me go get my bag, and I ran and got my bag, and we got in the car. It didn't really hit me till a couple of days later that I wasn't going to see my brother again. I think I watched every member of my family, you know, break down into tears. But I think now we've kind of formed a unit, and I feel like the American people have come together, and that's really helped.
This wonderful expression all the time of the American people coming together. Max.
I have a question for the lieutenant of the in the fire company. A friend of my dad's was one of the 12 firefighters found in the collapsed staircase, and ever since September 11th, I've been interested in what firefighters were thinking that day. So, my question for you is, if you could have, what would you have chosen to do differently that day?
Not much I could have done differently. The circumstances were beyond, you know, my control and the control of the fire department.
Well, that's Ray Brown. He's a lieutenant in the New York City Fire Department, and I just want to show you a little picture of him, because that's him in the middle, being carried away from Ground Zero, or being helped away from Ground Zero by two of his colleagues. I think we all know deep in our bones just how the New York Fire Department and other rescue workers suffered on that particular day, and how when so many people were running out of the buildings, people like Lieutenant Brown and others were running into the building. I don't think we ever get over how absolutely astonishing that is. What's the day's story of your company?
We responded after the second plane hit.
You're from Brooklyn, right?
From Brooklyn, yes. And we responded to the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. And then we got our orders to report to a staging area on Liberty and West Street. In about 5 minutes there, we were on our way into the South Tower when that collapsed. We all scattered. I ran. I tried to run across the street, and I was, fortunate. There were people to the right and left of me that were getting hit and were getting killed.
I know the kids have got some questions for you, but I have one, because you were found, I think, because of one of your firefighters' tools, right? Your light?
Correct, yes.
Have you got, and I see you've got it with you. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah. Well, after we survived the first collapse, I went back to my fire truck, and the guys from my company were there. And, well, first let me say that I never felt so proud in my whole life, because they were there and they said, "Okay, Lou, what do we do? We just survived hell," and they wanted to know what we're going to do. So I ran into a chief I know, and he told me that there were firefighters trapped in the Marriott Hotel. So we went into the Marriott Hotel, and we were within 5 feet of Lieutenant Bob Nagel, and we were talking to him, and we were in the process of trying to save him when the second tower came down. And I have no memory of what happened after that point, but when all the guys, everybody scattered again, and they wanted to know, like, they were calling out names, and then they kept asking for me, and I wasn't answering. And then they saw my light. They saw the beam from my light, and miraculously, I was thrown into the reinforced area of the Marriott Hotel. And as we've seen in several pictures, that was the only area that anybody, if you weren't in that little reinforced area, you didn't survive. And
I know a lot of kids have got questions for you. Jason.
I just want to know, like, when the first plane hit, what was going through your mind, and what were you, like, really thinking about when it happened?
Well, at the time, I didn't think that my company was going to respond. We're in Brooklyn, but since I had worked in Manhattan for 6 years, a lot of my fellow firefighters were trying to ask me for advice and just my opinion on what they thought, how we were going to put that fire out. But I knew right from the get-go that we weren't putting that fire out.
Yes?
Are you ever afraid of going to work anymore?
Well, that's a good question.
That's a real good question. Yeah. I've always been afraid, a little bit afraid. I've had a lot of friends die over the years. But, that's what I do. That's my job, and I love my job.
I think you have said to us on several times now that what got you through this year were kids. What do you mean by that?
When I got to the hospital and when I started back getting into my life again, the hugs and kisses and pats on the back and cards and letters and quilts, it was just amazing. It was amazing. It was, I learned, how much pain that the human heart can withstand. But I also learned how much love can absorb.
All these things in the studio were done by kids. All these wonderful and sometimes frightening montages. And these quilts which were here have been gathered all together and now put up at the New York Historical Society. So they'll be kept in perpetuity for a long time. Yes, Charlotte, do you have a question?
I was wondering if Saddam bin Laden.
Say again?
Saddam bin Laden.
Osama bin Laden?
Yeah, is dead or not.
Charlotte, you really put your finger on something quite fascinating, because there are people who think he's alive in the government, and there are people who think he's dead. And the question is, does it make any difference one way or the other? We have Martha Raddatz with us, who covers the Pentagon and the State Department for us in Washington. Martha, let me ask you that. Does the government think Osama bin Laden is dead or alive, or it just plain doesn't know?
I think it just plain doesn't know. And I think the reason they think more that he's alive is because they have no evidence that he's dead. They haven't heard any sort of chatter saying, oh, we've lost our leader. They certainly have seen no evidence that he's dead. So I think they're leaning on the side of believing he's still alive. And they have no idea where he is. Oftentimes during the last year, we'd hear all kinds of different stories. He's in this area, he's in this area. They do believe he was in one particular area when the United States was doing its heaviest bombing, so they thought they might have gotten him, but they're just not sure. But the thing I always think of in an encouraging way is that when you're playing hide and seek and you can't find somebody, that person who's hiding often can't operate very well either. They can't eat as well, they can't make phone calls, they can't do all the things that are really scary when they're hiding like that.
Now, I want you to, you're sitting beside your son, Jake, so I'd love to know what Jake thinks about all this. Jake, what do you think? You listen to your mother talk all the time. You got any impressions?
Well, personally, I think that he's still alive, but I think we'll catch him soon because we've narrowed him down, and I think when we do catch him, it'll be really good.
I just want to just ask the kids a question first. How many of you think it makes a difference if Osama bin Laden is dead or alive? Is it, yeah, it does make it. Why do you think it makes a difference? Mics are down this end, right?
Well, really, I think it's good if he's dead, because then we'd know that he'd be gone for good, unless somehow they clone him or something, if they have that power. And except if he's gone, then all of his allies, if he did have like an ally in Iraq or something, if they had the nuclear missiles, then they might shoot some at us.
Mandy?
Osama bin Laden is not the only terrorist in the world. There's so many others. So if he was dead, yeah, it would make a small difference. But you have to consider the fact that there's so many other terrorists around the world.
I was wondering if the people in Afghanistan were trying to help Osama bin Laden hide, or trying to help us find him.
Oh, that's a very interesting question. Do you mind if I direct that question to somebody else? I think Martha Raddatz is the one to answer that because she pays pretty close attention to Afghanistan. Are the people in Afghanistan trying to help Osama bin Laden, or are they hiding him, right, Mackenzie?
Well, I think most of the people right now in Afghanistan are helping the United States look for Osama bin Laden, but the concern is that there are still some people there, because the Taliban had taken over for a very, very long time, and some people there were supporting Osama bin Laden, that they're helping. And that's what's making this hunt even more frustrating.
Yes, sir? Jake?
Well, I just wanted to know, if we bomb Iraq, would that make Iraq and the Taliban allies?
Yeah, to ask your mother.
Go ask him. Ask the public affairs officer.
That's a very good question.
That's a very good question, Jake. And I'm not prepared for that. No. If the United States bombs Iraq, will the Taliban or Al-Qaeda be allies? I think there are a lot of people in the world, if the United States bombed Iraq, who would be more angry at the United States. I think people in Al-Qaeda would probably say, isn't that great? Now they're all involved with Iraq, and maybe we can get away with something else, or maybe we can make an ally out of them. Osama bin Laden himself seems to switch sides over the years. Sometimes he was with Iraq, sometimes he was against Iraq. So you don't know for certain what he's doing, but I think right now the organization cares about themselves, and they would be all too happy if the United States went after Iraq because they think there'd be less attention. How is that? Is that okay answer? Okay.
Yeah. Actually, we'd like to subscribe to your dinner conversations. Is anybody else worried about the United States attacking Iraq? Yes, EJ. EJ, right? Front.
I'm kind of worried because Iraq, they have kind of nuclear weapons, and if we took action against them, wouldn't they fight back using these weapons?
It's a good question. The president's one of the parts of the debate now. The president says that Saddam Hussein or Iraq has the makings of the nuclear weapons and also bacteriological and chemical weapons. If the United States attacked Iraq, would you feel safer?
If they succeeded, I would feel a little bit safer, but when they were attacking, I wouldn't feel very safe because they could attack Iraq. Because they just, I don't know, they just...
Okay. Hey, listen, nobody else has the answer. No reason you should have either. Some of you will remember that Dr. Kyle Pruitt, who's a psychiatrist, was here with us last year from Yale University.
A year ago, we sat here concerned and worried, not sleeping, frightened for our children, having no clue what it would feel like a year from now. But we know there are many children in America who are still quite frightened. They are coping and they're wonderful. They're asking great questions, but fear is a part of their life in ways that it was not before September 11th. A word to the parents. Think thoughtfully with your children about how they're doing. If they are afraid, they have their reasons. Respect their fears. Talk with them about it. Silence is not protection. It simply precludes solutions. So we have learned over and over again, listen to your children, find out what they mean, because that is going to be the road back to health for them.
How many of you kids, that show of hands is not always the most reliable thing, but how many of you kids actually have talked about it with your parents in the last year? Anybody not talked to their parents about it? Yeah, it's interesting because in a poll we did of the country, we found that about half the kids in the country said they talked to their parents about it, and half of them hadn't. One of the things we noticed last year, and I think I noticed again this year, is that the kids often seem so much more articulate than those of us who are older. Which brings me a little bit to Razia. Razia, you're an Arab American and Afghan American, and Yasmin is an Arab American. And are you both Muslims? And what's the year been like for you?
Well, before September 11th, I never wore my scarf. I
Really?
just wore it in school because I go to an Islamic school. And outside of school, I never wore it. But after September 11th, I felt that I had to wear it to represent my people, my religion, and myself. And after I wore it, I wanted to show people that I wasn't an evil person, that what people think. But, when I wear it, my parents weren't okay with it. They're like, you're going to get hurt or something. But I felt pride in myself. And when I wore it, I got some remarks from people, saying you're a terrorist or go back to your country.
It's changed in some way because when we walk down the street, some people will mock at us and make comments because they see us wearing a scarf. But I feel that as long as you don't fully understand our religion, then you shouldn't make comments because there's ignorant people and there's extremists in every religion. It's not just Islam. So as long as you haven't read the Quran fully and understood, don't make a comment, whether it be positive or negative.
I have a question. What is America up against this time? Out of all times we've went to war, I don't think we know what we're up against this time.
That's a really tough question, said he, looking around. You know something? That's the kind of question that journalists give to public relations officers in the Army. So what are we up against?
Well, Peter, one of the things that's hard for most people to understand is just because we can't talk about the specifics of something doesn't mean we don't know. And just because it's hard to explain something doesn't mean that we don't understand what it is we're trying to accomplish. What's different about this war is that it's not in any one place, it's not in any one country. There's no defined line that says, I'm on this side and you're on that side. It's global, and it's called a global war on terrorism. We have to be very careful about how we go after each one of those places.
Yeah, Sanita?
Being in a war in Bosnia,
Are you Bosnian?
yes, I'm Bosnian, and I came here a couple of years ago. And just knowing that when you're in a war, you're terrified to death, because I went through days when I would cry, we would stay in the basement, and you hear airplanes on top, and you would never know, are you going to get out alive? Are you going to be okay, And we all come to America here for freedom and for an education. And you said earlier that if we do bomb Iraq, you said that you would feel better. Why would that make you feel better? Is war the solution to everything?
Natalie?
I just don't think war should be the answer to everything. I think that peace should be the answer.
Now, we've run pretty much the end of our time, but before we do, I want to make just sure that a lot of you, anyway, have times for some quick final thoughts about the year. And I want to start with you, Dr. Butts, because you wanted to say something.
I think it's important to hear the children when they speak about peace, negotiation, and talk in order to resolve problems. I think that we would be wise to hear these children as they speak to us in this way. Yes, even about Osama bin Laden, whom we can't find, and about a crazy war that threatens to take more of their lives. Because if this war continues, remember, it's these children, not us old folk, who will have to fight.
It is certainly our rule here to listen to the children. Margot.
I think that September 11th really showed us what our nation stands for, and that how strong we really are, and that when the time comes, we really can pull together as one.
Tell me.
I think that the terrorists could have taken away our Twin Towers and the lives of many thousands of people, but they can never take away the pride of being an American.
That's very thoughtful. Annie.
I think that in some ways September 11th might have been good because it showed the worst in people, but it also showed some of the best.
Well, that's very interesting. Okay.
And just that the terrorists were trying to separate us, but it's really brought us more together.
Well, I have a feeling by the number of hands that we could go on, and maybe we should go on by ourselves for quite some time, but that's as much time as they're going to give us today, and I thank you. I thank all of you adults for coming and being so patient with us. But once again, mostly I thank you all for helping us to understand more than we did before we met you. Thank you.